afternoon and welcome back. We want to especially say a thank you for our breaks and our lunch today. It was provided by the Oklahoma Fire Chiefs Association. Anybody here a member of that organization? Yes, thank you for lunch. It was also funded by Fire Service Training, Fire Protection Publications, the publisher of FSTAR Fire Training Materials, as well as Dean Kirtley's office and the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology. And I hear there's cookies this afternoon. We'd like to welcome another fire department to tell us about their implementation of the new tactics, and Deputy Chief Cecil Clay from Oklahoma City.
Okay. Good afternoon. Hopefully, after having a sandwich or something, y'all won't try to go to sleep on me. We've been going through these fire tactics for the last probably close to 2 years. We started out real slow and started implementing some of the basics back again, and then we got fully into what we call resetting the fire on room and content fires. So you can see here, our chief officers first initially started, we trained them, tried to get the idea in their head that this stuff works. And that was probably one of the more difficult things for our department, because you're talking about people who have generally around 20 years on the job and stuff, and they're confident that they know what they've been doing. As everybody in this profession has to be confident with the tactics that they're using, or they're not going to be able to perform at the level that they need to perform at. So after presenting some of the things that Dan and UL and NIST had put out and the science, just weren't able to argue with the thermocouples. They actually figured out, yes, this is better. So we started putting these things together in our chiefs meetings, figured out, well, how are we going to implement these tactics for our department? And what do we normally do? We go out there and try things. So that's how we got a couple of key chiefs that were on board with this and wanted to participate, and went out there and tried to start seeing what we could do to implement these tactics, the best practice we could use for our department. And in doing that, we kind of found some things were okay, some things weren't working out as well for us. It's things like deploying hand lines. Once you've charged a hand line, it's difficult to move it around to the next point if it's very far from where you're at. So we started just going through those processes, and the chiefs bought into the science. After they saw the presentations, we looked through a lot of videos and different things, and started to work to find out what our best way to do these things were. So the battalion chiefs went out. We used the chain of command, as it said there before, to deliver these things. We went from battalion to battalion. Each battalion chief would go out and train in his district. We have 6 districts in our city on 3 different shifts, so that's basically 18 different fire station or fire departments, if you want to look at it that way, and we wanted them to all do the exact same thing. And so that's why whenever we started doing this, we looked at things like, you can see there, Dan, we put videos out that we had already looked at as chiefs and knew they had the correct methods going out there. So we did videos, we did hands-on training at different places, trying to see how the deployment of the lines worked, how the door control would work with our crews. And then in the end, I delivered about a 2-hour class to everybody on our department, basically in the suppression division, even through to our fire investigators, because they said, hey, if you're going to start putting water in there at different times, we need to know how that affects the things that they're starting to look for. And some people, how things are in the fire service, people have opinions on what things work the best. We came to a conclusion to, what we determined as a group, what worked best, and that's what we went with. So when we started looking at these things, some of it was kind of ugly. We noticed that we were doing things like the chief was talking about earlier. We're looking at stuff that we're doing, and it's not exactly what we were intending to do with our policies and things. And two of the biggest ones were we weren't doing our backup line correctly. Our backup line kept finding its way into the structure without replacing the backup line. And it's supposed to be outside the IDLH by our policy and by NFPA 1500. And another one was we had kind of slid away from doing a 360, a true 360, and identifying where the fire was. And that, in this day and age, is just not acceptable. There's too many things that can happen, especially with the new volatile fuels that have progressed over the years. The temperatures that fires get to are double. And so those were things that we needed to correct. Just like Chief Alcohos was saying, that we had, everything hinges on each other. And so without having those policies done, these tactics weren't going to work for us. So a common practice started becoming, we would give a windshield report. We'd pull up on the scene, say I'm on the scene of a one-story brick veneer, I got heavy smoke showing from side A, and then as we do, and I think Dan talked about a little bit, we'd try to go to where we thought the fire was. Well, that's not always the correct thing to do, and that sometimes gets you in a lot of trouble. And we were also, one of the things that our department was really pressing for years was that we want to be aggressive with ventilation, and especially, we want to do vertical ventilation, which can as we know, vertical ventilation is probably the best natural type ventilation there is, and it's going to bring more oxygen into the fire even quicker. So we would give these what we were sliding for our 360 report was this windshield report or an on-scene report. And then we were going straight to the fire doing what we thought we needed to do. And sometimes the 360 never got done. And if it did get done, it wasn't getting transmitted over the radio. So imagine playing football or something like that, and the quarterback knows what the play is, but nobody else knows what the play is and just says, go to work. Well, that was kind of what you're doing whenever you're not doing a 360. So we started stressing that we wanted to do a 360, and we have definitely stressed that over the last year to the point that if, we will prompt you to do one on the scene if you haven't already got it done. And one of the things that we'd say about that 360, if you can't complete it, say you can't complete it, and say why you can't complete it so the next person can prepare to complete the 360. We can't start a fight if we don't know where to swing or who to hit. And that's what, we press out there on doing that 360. Said earlier, the other thing that was kind of ugly that we were doing, our backup line. We have very aggressive firefighters. We want to do an interior attack, and before we started these tactics, we were always trying to do it from the unburnt side to the fire. So basically, we were going down the chimney to get to the firebox. So these things we had to change, and the backup line was one of the biggest ones to change because that was where we were going to do our door control. So what are we doing now? Basically, we still do that windshield report. That's quick information. You can do it as you roll up on the scene, just like I said before. But then the officer is going to get off, and he's going to do that 360. He's going to tell if he's got a room and content fire. We call that a reset, kind of to identify what tactic we're going to do. So they'll do the 360. They'll find the safest and quickest place that they can apply water. If you notice, I said the safest, not just the quickest, because sometimes we take safety out of the equation, and and just go for what we think might be the quickest. The safest and the quickest way to apply water, which generally is going to be from the exterior of the building because you're out of the IDLH environment, you don't have a threat of thermal injury or the toxic gases. Plus, if you do that, you don't have to have an SCBA on. You don't have to have 2 in, 2 out, 1,500. You don't even have to have a second person. You don't even have to have a permanent water supply. You can use tank water, the 500 gallons that you get there, that you arrive there with on your engine. So if you're applying water to the fire as quickly as possible, we found that that makes a huge difference. Doesn't allow the fire to grow, also starts knocking it down. So we're gonna, I mentioned before, resetting the fire is what we do on a room and content fire. Now, if it's a structure fire, it's broken through the box and it's got up into the structural members, the attic or whatever, we call that a transitional attack. We're gonna do basically the same thing, do the 360, identify that. The officer that's in command, or the incident commander, is going to call for a transitional attack, which will let them know that it's that we've got a structure fire, and hopefully they've identified where it is and where they think it's going in their 360 report, and they will start applying water. The rest of the crew will get prepared to do an interior attack by putting up their SCBAs and everything, and getting a backup line up there. On entry, one of the things that we do, we didn't start out doing this, but I found that if we don't require things, then sometimes they don't quite always get done. So now, as of I think last March, we have a thermal imager on every engine and every truck company and every chief's car. So the only apparatus that Oklahoma City has that doesn't have a thermal imager on it would be a tanker or a brush rig. So every officer has a thermal imager, and they're required to take that tick with them. Somebody on that company is going to take the tick with them. When we make entry to for an interior fire attack, we require our officers to give a ceiling temperature. And I know this is kind of one of those things where, okay, how much information do you have to give them? Well, we know that that thermal imager is not a thermometer. Well, we do know that if I told you it's reading 10 now, and now it's on 12, it's at least giving us something to evaluate. It's either getting hotter or it's getting cooler. Also, if you don't do the 360, you're not going to know that, hey, I know I've got a big fire above me in the attic or below me if you've got a basement, and you know, that's why you still have to do the 360, because you could be using the thermal imager to read a ceiling temperature of 130 degrees and still have the big fire above you. So all these things have to play on each other. The thermal imager, given the ceiling temperature, one thing that tells us, they've got their radio on the right channel and they've got their thermal imager with us. They can, as you saw in some of the earlier videos or pictures, you know, do a 360 with it. It can help you identify where the fire is. Also, if you get into a larger structure and you're not able to see the fire on the exterior, it'll help you identify where the heat signatures are and move to the interior there to attack the fire. Again, we don't want to start a fight with somebody and not know where to hit them on the chin, you know, just go in swinging wildly. The other thing, that whenever they report that they're making that interior attack, that lets us know that we've got somebody moving into the structure. We also get that backup line at the point of entry. The officer on the backup line is going to be just inside the door, monitoring with his thermal imager and keeping an eye on the interior crew in case they need to move that line up. Now, what we try to tell our folks is, if you're not making a difference in that thermal reading or the thermal temperature, then you're either not putting enough water on the fire or you haven't hit the seat of the fire. So if you haven't hit the seat of the fire, it's never good when the fire finds you. You want to find the fire first. But the second thing is, if you are putting water on the seat of the fire and you're not making a difference, then you need to either get another line there or you need to exit the structure. Because the only way we're going to control these things are with gallons per minute. So that's one of the things that we did whenever we looked at our backup line. That officer's got to be disciplined enough not to freelance over there and go, you know, hey, they just went around the corner, I'm going to go look. Because what happens when the officer leaves that door? He's no longer controlling the door, and the firefighters outside don't know what the heck's going on. Well, they're going to follow him in there. And that's kind of where we got whenever we were advancing our backup line in the past. So if we do need to move our backup line up, we just call to get another backup line. And that chain, you know, if you have a large structure, that chain's still there. You've got somebody to protect the crew that's out in front of them, and then you've got the backup line that's outside of the IDLH environment that's protecting all of them. So that's where we're at. We also have recently just finished our SOPs on all these tactics. They've been reviewed in the draft form, and as the chief was saying earlier, that's one of the hardest things. It took us a very long time to write that. What do you put into it? What are your people going to read? At what point do they put it down and quit looking at it because you've made it too long? So we've got that, and we are in the process of releasing those SOPs. One of the things that I'm going to play here is a short radio traffic that's got some pictures that go along with the radio traffic of a fire that was probably, Chief Ever, about a year ago, before we were really strong into these tactics. And this is a single company that was sent on a, as it says up there, a burn complaint. So one engine company is a paramedic engine company, so it was staffed with 4, and hopefully the audio will start playing here. Or they didn't hire me for my computer skills, so that's not going. Let's see if I can try it again. That's why it's not playing. It's not playing off of this, is it? Okay. See if you can help me out here. I have to back out and go to this. Or is that it? Anyway, this fire company, 4-man engine company, the officer arrived on the scene. There's a plug down the road from him. As you can see, it was about 7 o'clock in the morning. We changed shifts at 7 o'clock. And this was the structure, the actual structure there. So it's a duplex, but it's, until you start looking at it, it's like 6 of them tied together. So there's 3 units there tied together. That's kind of the floor plan. The officer arrived on the scene, realized that he did not have a burning complaint, but actually had a structure fire. During that structure fire, this is side A, what they pulled up on, and he noticed that he had fire coming and got out, sent his engine company on down the road, which this has really not worked out very well. Okay, he sent the engine company back down the street where you can see where this hydrant was. He sent a firefighter and the driver down there to catch the plug and bring it back. As they brought it back, he was back here, had fire venting out of this window, gave a temperature of 1,000 degrees, which that's irrelevant. He pointed the thermal imager into the window, and obviously there's fire there. He brought his firefighter with him. He did a 360 the best he could. He could do about a 270 because obviously the building was very long. Told them that he wanted to reset this fire on this CB corner, and as the engine pulled back up to the scene, the firefighter went and pulled a pre-connect, and we like to use a smoothbore nozzle on these resets, and he pulled that to the back of the structure. As the officer was giving the orders and the firefighter was doing the reset, they went on, and this was actually the main entrance of there. At that time, they had already hooked up to the plug, caught the plug. The second firefighter that was on the back catching the plug came back up the street, pulled another line to this front door, and was waiting for the officer to tell him that the fire was reset. Fire was reset. The second firefighter, the first firefighter dropped the line at the back and came up and backed up the firefighter at that entrance and made entry. And they gave a ceiling temperature of, I believe, 300 degrees. Went ahead and made entry, moved to the back, and the fire was pretty much out. Matter of fact, the fire room was only 200 degrees with their thermal imager. So as you can see, this is a single company that arrived on the scene of an unknown. They didn't realize they had a structure fire, and 4 people were able to do this tactic. Now that's pretty compelling evidence that, you know, this can be done by just about anybody, because if you've got an engine company and you're operating with less than 3 or 4 people, I don't know how to help you there very much, but you can still do it. You just may not be able to do it as quickly. We have done several of these reset fires over the last year and a half, probably 50. I've kept records on them. We probably got about 50 of them that were venting out of a door or a window, or a door and a window. Out of all 50 of those fires that we've tracked, on entry, probably a majority of them, 30 or 30 plus, were below 200 degrees after they did the reset tactic. And then there were a couple that were 450 degrees, but those had some extenuating circumstances. One of them, I believe, was the remnants of a meth lab, and it had a couple of different places it was on fire. And the other one was a tongue and groove ceiling where it really packed the heat in, and the heat hadn't exited. So this is a tactic that will drop the temperature, make it safer to enter, and it'll also a lot of times put the fire out. One of the interesting things when we started doing this was we didn't realize that when you took your thermal imager in there on the attack crew and you start looking for the fire room, that might be the coldest place in there. I recall another one of the incidents we had where, you know, they said we were going towards the BC corner because that's where we were told. Then we came upon the fire room. It was 180 degrees. When we had made entry, it was like 300 degrees. So a lot of times the actual room that you apply the water to from the exterior is going to be cooler than where you make entry. Some of the things that we've progressed to doing is, you know, we no longer tell our folks they've got to fight fire from the unburnt side. Matter of fact, it is more advantageous to go to the closest entry to the fire room, and it's a whole lot less dangerous. It's quicker, and you're gonna end up getting the thermal threat out of there even faster. So that's kind of what we're doing, Oklahoma City's doing. We've done, you know, we've been doing this for a while. I can't believe that this thing works this good. We've got several other incidents. We may show some of those this afternoon. Some of the people here were on these incidents. One of them was, I would have never thought they would have put out. It was the chief that arrived there actually called for a multiple alarm. and rightfully so, because it was a 3-story church. But this has been real successful. The one thing that I'll tell you, if you go out and do this, after you get people to apply the tactic, it'll sell itself. I mean, I've had people come up to me and, just literally say, I appreciate you letting us do this. There's no way we could have put that out any other way. And, or at least without that much, it would have been a whole lot more effort, and there would have been a whole lot more risk at hand. So that's my portion of what we're doing here in Oklahoma City, and I think that Chief Derricks can come back up and continue on how they've applied this in the West Coast there.